And I thought I'd ask a series of questions that they could share with us what their experience is like with their hosting or cloud provider. And it's pretty cool. So we've just had a really good chat. It's a pretty diverse group with different requirements around storage or networking or security. And they're at different levels. Some have a few machines, some have several hundred machines. Some are paying companies tens of thousands of dollars. I think I heard 50 from one of them to Amazon or something. So there's a lot of interesting tidbits up here that they're willing to share with the hosting community. And we want to keep this interactive. So if you have questions or you didn't catch something, go ahead and stop. I also want them to interact with each other. We were having a really good chat a few minutes ago when we all met each other properly. So let's get started. If you could introduce who you are, what the name of your company is, what you do, and what the company does, and who your hosting provider or providers is. That'd be great. Go ahead.
All right, I'm Jeff Seibert. I'm the founder and CEO of Crashlytics. We do mobile crash analysis. So I'm assuming most people here have smartphones or used apps before. It turns out that apps today crash 1 billion times every single day. And it's a massive problem because the developers actually don't know what's happening. So all your frustration is really in vain at the moment. We are trying to fix that. We're developing tools to detect crashes as they happen and report back to the developer the line number of code that it crashed on, so then they are able to very quickly fix it. We're here in Kendall Square. We're about 12 people, and we use Amazon as our host, along with 2 other colos across the country to host specifically Mac machines, which are required for our processing.
I'm Phil Stanhope. I'm the VP of Engineering and Operations at Yoda, which is here in Boston. We're also in Dayton. We're about 45 people right now. What we're all about is making your website faster. And what that means to us is we're providing a set of 2 primary services. One is around front-end optimization. The performance of your website is very much related to the power and the speed of your origin servers and where they may be hosted. So we get in the middle of that, and we actually rewrite parts of your website, restructure it to increase performance, cache it, etc. We do that on a global basis. So that touches, in our case, we're in almost every major Amazon location for that service, plus 4 data centers of our own, plus some of Microsoft Azure. We're also in Lino and Voxel for some of our other services. The other key service is monitoring. So how do you know that your website is performing slowly from a user's perspective? And that's where we run browsers in the cloud. So we run IE, Firefox, Chrome, currently in 14 locations. You get to see what your pages are performing like, get a whole bunch of metrics about those. And with a new service that we're just in the soft launch of right now, schedule and conduct recurring monitoring and start to do things like multivariate analysis. So we're a big consumer of, as we talk backstage, a lot of different service providers. And part of my team's job is to sort of flatten that and make it all look the same despite where we may be running that stuff from.
My name is Michael Klett. I am the co-founder and technical lead at Chargeify.
Okay.
Yes, so Chargeify is a recurring billing application. So if you have an application or a service that you want to bill on a recurring basis for, say monthly, and by what it's a pretty good business to be in, instead of focusing on the billing yourself, you just focus on what it is that makes your app or service unique, and you offload all that billing stuff to us. So we're a spin-off of a company that's also based in Boston called Grasshopper. They have a virtual phone system. So we're leveraging their 10 years of recurring billing experience for hundreds of thousands of customers. And our co-founder and CEO, Lance Wally, was a former co-founder of Engineer, the Rails hosting company. And there, when he was there, he just saw how painful it was to manage recurring billing. He just wanted to provide great Rails hosting, but they were always banging their heads against the recurring billing. So he knew that once he moved on from that, he wanted to be involved with something that could make the recurring billing easier. So we're hosted at GSI Layered Tech in Kansas City. We have a unique requirement that security is important to us with the handling of credit cards on behalf of other people. So we are PCI level 1 compliant, and to the ACO or to provide ACO as client hosting.
My name is Claudia Santoro. I'm the CTO at VSnap. VSnap is a video messaging platform that is used by businesses to personalize communication with their customers. It's 60-second asynchronous video messages to which you can attach documents, information, coupons, and so on, basically. And we're finding that through the use of video, the open rates increased by over 41%. So we're seeing a lot of great traction among businesses using this as a way to reach out to their customers and really get through to them. We're about a year old, and so we're very much at the beginning. Our use of hosting is not as extensive as these guys yet, but we're growing there. We're going to get there. Right now, we're mostly hosted at Rackspace. That's where all our development servers are, and that's where our web server is running, and all our queues and databases and stuff like that are running there. However, we also use Amazon for our video streaming, and that's where we store most of our videos. Right now, we're looking at alternatives to see how we can automate this whole deployment process and also automated scaling, load balancing, and so on. So we're at the very beginning of this research, and so it's very interesting to be here and see what the options are.
I'm Devin Hillard. I'm a founder of SparkRed.
Is it on?
That one wasn't working.
Yeah, we just had trouble with that one.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is this better?
Yeah.
Great. I'm Devin Hillard. I'm one of the founders of SparkRed, a 4.5-year-old company based out of Washington, and we have a Boston office and a Chelmsford office. We provide global hosting for people who are using the Oracle Commerce product. It used to be ATG, which is a company out of Cambridge, and is mostly Fortune 1000 e-commerce clients. We're specialized in ATG, and our core competency is folks who have a decade plus of ATG know-how. So it's a very small niche, but it's a good niche to be in, I think. Our focus is basically the 4 cornerstones of hosting, which is speed, security, stability, and support. And then we use partnerships with other companies like Limelight or PayPal or New Relic to deliver additional services to our clients, so they have to worry less about infrastructure and running the site, and more spend their time focusing on building their business, basically. We host exclusively with SoftLayer, kind of a blend of services from them, in Dallas, Seattle, and Amsterdam.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think definitely a diverse set, from Amazon to co-location to Rackspace and GSI and SoftLayer. I think many of us in the industry have heard of most of these providers. But I'd be really interested to understand which products and services you're using. So, in the Amazon world, there's ELB and S3 and EC2, and in managed hosting world, co-location world, there's different configurations, whether it be a full cabinet or a cage or beyond. And then, if it's dedicated virtual cloud, if you could just describe the products, the way some of the hosters package and price them. Just describe the products. We'll get into some of the other questions after that.
Okay. So great. So we're on Amazon. All of our servers are on EC2, apart from the ones I mentioned before, the Macs. We do use their Elastic Load Balancing service. Up until recently, we haven't been able to switch back to it yet after their recent outage, but do have plans to. We are using Route 53 as our DNS, which has been great so far. We're using S3 quite a bit for storage. I'd say on top of that, it's probably interesting what we're not using. We're not using their simple queuing service at all. The latency has not been acceptable for us. We're not using any of their database products either, simply because we want the control over exactly how the database is operating to basically tune it for our characteristics of our data coming in.
Okay, great.
In terms of Amazon, we use the ELB. That's primarily for our own website itself, and that has a different set of service levels associated with it as opposed to our optimization service. For optimization, we're just using compute, and we're using an awful lot of that, so that scales up and down as we're taking bandwidth and we're doing processing. And that's been pretty successful for us. We have had a couple of hiccups with DLD around it doesn't fair balance unless you run lots of instances behind it across availability zones, and while that's documented, they don't really talk about it that much, and that's one of my pet peeves. We also use S3 just as a big bucket store for the reasons for that. Azure and is really just used for Windows instances. We find that they perform actually better than Amazon Windows instances. And when we're just wanting to run, IT, for example, in the cloud, that's a perfect solution for us. And Microsoft has made that. Actually, they've been exceptional in trying to help us for obvious reasons. It's for their own desire to compete with Amazon in that space. For our own data centers, that's where we run a variety of our DNS services, and we're actually doing a lot of Hadoop-related processing. So we prefer to do that processing in places where we don't have to pay by the hour, and we're at a sufficient scale that we can afford to sort of rip the data out of the cloud back to a particular DC, and then run our big jobs there. Elastic IP is the other one that we use from Amazon, and that's my other little complaint with them is the number of IP addresses we need is more than they're willing to give us. So we'd like multiple IPs per box. We know many hosters will let us do that, but that's not something that the two big boys in the cloud space like to do.
So at GSI, we have a mix of physical machines and virtual machines. We have physical machines for our database cluster mainly, and then virtual machines for our web servers, utility machines, things that run the queues. One of the things we make a lot of use of at GSI is we rely on them for the security. They're responsible for the security of the physical machines, so who has access to those machines, background checks on those people, all that kind of stuff. They're also responsible for all of the security patches for us. So it's kind of nice that we're able to offload some of that. And then, like I say, offload the load to us and offload as many services as we can to the members.
So we use Rackspace primarily because they have this 1 year free that you can use as a startup. So basically it's great. As a startup, there's nothing more important than saving. And so we were able to use $1,000 worth of services with them for free for a whole year, and the whole year runs out in September basically. And I thought that was a tremendous help to us because it really helped us vet out our architecture, vet out our platforms, and really make sure that they could work in a cloud environment. And they made all that possible to us. So I thought that was, I really recommend them for that reason. They also allow you to customize instances in much more flexible ways than Amazon. Amazon has those 4 or 5 pre-configured images. Instead, with Rackspace, you have more flexibility. They provide better support in terms of being able to reach out to them and ask them questions about setting up email, hosting, and stuff like that. And so I moved off of Amazon to go to Rackspace so that I can compare them a little bit, at least for the main hosts. And so that's pretty primarily how we're using them. We also use their host down detection system that they have, which is very helpful to us, so we can detect whether our production servers are down or not. But that's essential.
Now, we primarily use dedicated servers at SoftLayer for performance, security, and licensing reasons. A lot of our software is licensed in a way that it's either impossible or makes very little sense to run it on VMs or cloud instances. We use some cloud instances for internal infrastructure services, DNS, some mail handling, things like that. And then we also use them extensively for spinning up clouds of JMeter agents, so we can do kind of infinite scale load testing for our clients from any node across the globe that SoftLayer's got a data center at, and then shut it all down a day later, which has been great. We also really rely on SoftLayer's networking, both their big pipes externally, but also their entirely independent private network for performance on a 3-tier architecture. It helps immensely. And also for PCI compliance, having a completely separate network infrastructure already built and configured for you. Places like Rackspace, you can build that. You charge you a lot for the hardware and setup. So it's been coming handy. We do use some of the SAN storage offerings at SoftLayer. They're Ecologics cluster-based SAN. We've had some issues with performance under high loads, using them as a Oracle rack cluster storage. So that's something that we're kind of struggling with. Can we optimize it in place, or do we need to deploy our own SAN solution? But to date, it's been all right. Those are kind of the core features that we use from SoftLayer. They have a bunch of other services that are more geared for folks who are either doing smaller scale sites. A lot of our folks are, like I said, Fortune 1000s. They drive a truckload of traffic, and it does kind of get you into different levels of performance requirements and billing levels for some of these services that are vended. So there's a lot of stuff that they offer, but we go our own if it's more affordable or it's more performant. So,
Great. Let's just stop there for a moment. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists about what they're doing at their host?
Could you talk about some idea of scale and how much bandwidth you're pushing, or how much something like that would give that gives it a better context?
Anyone want to answer that?
I'll mention one area of scale, just the number of VMs, and actually it's an interesting problem that we run into with two of the cloud providers, is that we're running anywhere from 200 to 300 VMs concurrently at any one time, never mind another 50 physical machines. You do reach limits that are not really documented in terms of how many VMs you can spin up in an availability zone or particular geography. And once you hit those, it's a political quagmire to sort of get those limits raised. We're actually going through one of those right now. It always seems to get fixed, but it's not, you're suddenly not very elastic once you get to that, if you're lucky enough to get to that size. You'll find that, they have to do their sort of allocation and provisioning, and you'll hit those.
I was just going to say, we're on a bit under 50 VMs or boxes, these 2 boxes on Amazon, and processing, I'd say, millions of data points a day. So it's not absurd, but it's still a lot of traffic.
we've got about 200 dedicated boxes and another 20 or 30 VM instances. We've probably about 10 clients, and most of them are running around 100 requests a second. We do have folks like People's Choice Awards is one of our clients. During the show time, they were pushing around 3.5 gigabits a second web traffic, not counting the stuff they'd offload to their CDN. That's all stuff coming from our origin. And we did round robin DNS across 10 front-end boxes for that. Some of the boxes were hitting over 700 megabits a second on a single host and held up pretty well. So we do push a lot of bandwidth in certain areas.
Wow, awesome information. Any other questions about that topic?
I'm sort of curious, for those of you who are using cloud services, how extensive have you, or to what extent have you engineered business continuity or disaster recovery into your cloud deployments? You know, we saw Amazon used to go down, and all of a sudden all these big websites or applications stopped functioning. You know, what have you folks done to sort of hedge against that single site failure?
So I can talk about that. We did go down briefly during Amazon's outage. We lost instantly our primary database and primary message server. Those actually weren't the problem. Our database failed over. Our message server we knew was not going to auto fail over, but it's behind the scenes, doesn't really impact anything. The bigger problem was ELB went down. And so we had no control over that, and we instantly lost all traffic. So we had to use DNS round robining to try to route traffic around that. That ended up working, obviously, within about an hour, and so then we were back up. But it was frustrating to really not have any sort of recourse because it wasn't our system that broke or suffered a major failure. And as I mentioned earlier, we haven't yet been able to switch back to ELB because we tried to, and it instantly went down. And there's no way through the API to sort of pre-warm it or tell them how much traffic to expect to that load balancer.
Why did it go down?
So the way ELB works is it's really just instances that they configure for you, and they start with small instances. And so if we're getting thousands of requests a second from all these devices hitting us, that just overwhelms the instance.
Any DR?
I'll just add, so we're not in the cloud right now. We hired a new operations engineer 2 weeks ago, and the first thing I asked him to do was read about Amazon's latest outage and one before that, and put together a report and see, like, does it make sense for us? How would we survive an outage like that? What is it that we can do? so that's actually, there's a chance we'll open up the cloud. And Amazon is great about the amount of information to publish after an outage. So there's a lot you can learn from that, and you can ultimately grow.
I could sort of two little anecdotes about that particular outage. Our service is designed to sort of work around that very problem. So one of our 6 primary topologies just was taken out, and we just knew that, and we routed around it. Our main website, though, did suffer. The primary database, failed completely. We went to the secondaries, which took us to the West Coast, and we were fine there. We also had IP Anycast on our DNS, so we could quickly route around those. The big decision was, during that window of time, do we permanently drop the records for the East Coast or not? So that even when it comes back on, didn't mean it was going to stay on, right? So you just don't know. We let that go. We actually got killed, though, on Leap Cycle like 12 hours later. Because we were heterogeneous across 340 plus VMs, all running 64-bit CentOS, and we just got munched, and we just had to sort of, that was much more painful than the man knower that sort of God made a disaster on the East Coast that took that one place down. So that's actually a lesson learned, right? On the one hand, your team wants to sort of, they don't like, they want it to be homogeneous. But if you had different versions of that OS or different kernel bug, you would not have suffered as much in such a short period of time. That's a hard one. That's a lesson learned, right? And I'm not sure what, I don't have a recommendation for the team yet. We want to actually stagger, our patches and security so that if there is, this once a year, once every 4 year type of thing, that you maybe survive a little bit better. That's an at-scale problem.
Cool.
I'll add one last thing, just on the Amazon front. It is nice that there's a lot of documentation and written knowledge online on how to architect around and use their different resources. So we do, every new system we bring up, we do think about how will this fail over and what basically are the risks and what our tolerance is, whether if an availability zone goes down or a region goes down or whatever.
Cool. So I have a question. What kind of relationship do you have with your hosting provider? Would you primarily say it's API-based and you never speak to them? Or would you say it's a support model or a managed hosting model? Or I'm kind of curious in terms of when you interact with your host. Is it just we pay the bill, or you actually call them and talk with them, or you interact with them online? Start with that.
We actually have a really close relationship with SoftLayer. Ever since the beginning, even when we had just a handful of boxes, they've been very good about working with us, and talking about our growth strategies, what's coming up in the next 12 months for us, what they're going to be rolling out in the next 12 months, their strategies, and kind of how they can help us grow. We've got a great account team, an account manager and a technical account manager. We go down to Dallas to meet with them about once a year. We get meetings with their top-level C team when we're there. They come up every time they're in Boston. We meet up. We talk about what's new with us, what's new with them, what do we want to see from them, right? And so we're certainly not one of their biggest clients, but I feel like a lot of our needs are being listened to and addressed as they start rolling out new services, figuring out where they're going to open their new data centers, and we're really kind of tightly aligned on that, which is great considering that they've got folks with them that are 10 times bigger than we are, or 20 times bigger. They do have great APIs we don't take advantage of. Again, that's on the roadmap. We use their standard ticketing stuff for regular requests, and then we call folks if we have deep questions or emergencies or whatever. But they take it very, very good care of us, even when we just had 5 boxes. So been very happy with that.
So I interacted both with Amazon and with Rackspace, and I have to say Amazon, I never was able to talk to them, and I don't think I even got a response on the forum. Well, instead, with SendGrid, they're very responsive, and SendGrid with Rackspace, they're extremely responsive, and but again, most of my interactions with them are through the panel and management of the service that way. I try to do as much self-help as possible. The one area that we do API integrations with is around email. We use both Amazon and SendGrid for this, and SendGrid is the one that is partnered with Rackspace with it. And so I'm quickly learning how differences between APIs and between different solutions can cost a startup or the ability to stay lean for a startup very much. And so I will probably looking forward, try to lean away from any API that is non-standard or that does not allow me to pick up and leave and go somewhere else relatively quickly. And that is the problem with a lot of these solution providers or these hosting providers are that they kind of you get stuck once you really start coding against their APIs and stuff like that. You're kind of stuck with them. And that was a big learning with Google and Google App Engine last year. And so I'm trying to learn from that and trying to also learn from the recent experiences with the email integrations.
So our managed host is great. We want them to be managed when there's a problem, right? I pick up the phone, I get somebody on the other end, I know who the good techs are, that's great. When it comes time to adding capacity, that's when I want them to be more like a cloud provider and have an API that I can provision in the box. Unfortunately, I think that there's a little bit of old school there. Sales guy that I have to call. Then there's an implementation team who wants to know what the server looks like. I'm like, no, really, just make it look like the other. Capacity, like I just want to press a button and have it done. So I think that's probably like a lesson for any newer. And I think a lot of them are starting to do this, but a managed hosting provider to be able to provide like the same level of API aware and scalability as Amazon is.
I must say we actually have really good relationships with all the different providers. So my quibbles are more technical than their willingness to reach out and sort of keep us informed and roadmaps and new locations, things like that, which is very important to us as we expand. One thing I guess I would say though, and I guess it addresses this complexity issue. We had to embrace this complexity. It was just the nature of our business, and so, if you will, my NOC guys, they're not monkeys. My engineering, my ops team in particular, they are very adept at writing not just bash scripts, but very sophisticated automation tools so that we can manage across this. We have the luxury, I guess, of being able to do that. But I need a much different guy or gal in the data center than I would think that I had, say, 15 years ago. And I think that's the nature of sort of the game today in this next generation of systems management in the cloud. It's just I got programmers on that team, and they're writing as complex, algorithms and logic to keep the systems running as, the other pieces of the system.
So we're now at the point where we pay Amazon about $15,000 a month, and while I understand that might not be that much for them, it's clearly a lot for a startup, and it'd be nice to at least hear from them at some point. They've yet to email or call us, and so we don't know anyone there. And we go through, and there are forms of lost cause, so we don't even bother posting. We usually just Google and play with stuff. We have had to file some support tickets, especially around the CLB thing, and their answers have primarily been wrong. So I think Amazon needs to provide much better support.
Your experience is not unusual, a friend of mine is their biggest single customer, and his response is not much better.
Oh, wow.
Reassuring.
So, I thought we were going to uncover some interesting things. We have some questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't want to take the back on it. If you guys are going to be filling the physical applications from now on, I guess I just can't get on the why do you stay with AWS? Do you take other solutions, other providers? Is it just primarily price? I mean, what's making you switch over from AWS to the cloud?
The flexibility. And maybe other providers have it, but I like the range of services, and I can literally push a button and have a new server in 3 minutes, and do that across their system. And sort of, as a startup, our focus is on deploying the software, and so especially we have not spent any time optimizing cost. Amazon, I think, is extraordinarily expensive compared to if you buy the same server from somewhere else. But that's not our concern right now. It's rather we need to deploy this and scale this as quickly as possible. So I'd say it's probably not worth our time to investigate other providers and then have to move a lot of stuff to it. We just don't have the team to do that.
And they don't make it
It's
easy.
a cost of change issue as well. So I'm not stuck on Amazon. I want to be clear about that. We have our own private data centers. Those parts that we can't get from Amazon, price, we don't. And if we can get better performing VMs from somebody else, and particularly for our monitoring services, we will. To me, it's in the end, it's a spreadsheet that tells me what I'm going to do, and we're constantly sort of looking at that and tuning it. And but as a startup, capex is spent. I'd rather spend on intellectual property development than depreciation on a balance sheet. It's not going to come back to me. And
Right.
so those are the trade-offs that you got to look at.
So this is a really interesting question for a marketing guy. The early decision, the why, right? I think we heard they were the first to be PCI certified or something. I meet a lot of startups in Boston. There's like an event every night I can go to and meet another startup. And when I ask who you host with, and I always do, almost always it's Amazon. Often Rackspace, I hear Linode, Engineer, Roku, and a few others. But almost always Amazon. So, what are they doing different that attracted you? Was it your VC firm, or what
So
was that?
I started using Amazon in my previous startup in 2007, and that was right when I forget exactly when they got started, but it was very early on, and we were we actually had started on Joint, I believe, at the time, and we're not happy with that at all, just given the level of service. And so experimented moving some stuff to Amazon, and it worked, and their API was simple, and we could literally just go and sign up and click and have something, and I didn't have to talk to a salesperson or struggle with anything, just put in the credit card and it worked. And so it was great for us then. We're now, and then because of that, it was a no-brainer to use it for this. This startup is clearly taxing it a little bit more, but it's still not bad enough where I would consider switching. Like the support issues, we've only really had this one problem. Everything else has worked very smoothly and has saved us a ton of time. So we put up with a little bit of challenges.
So what is it a time to move forward? You spend $180,000 a year.
Yep.
And a month there. But
Yep.
you're having this issues. So at what point do you look at, and I understand this, it's not worth the time to spend $180,000 a year on this.
Right. So our market's growing, I'd say 300 to 400% a year, and we just need to scale quickly and establish it. So we're venture backed. So I think in contrast, we're not at the point where we're caring about the balance sheet or optimizing anything, because that's meaningless at this point. Like if we don't grow our user base by 10x by Christmas, we're going to fail. So who cares how much we're spending right now?
Right.
And so because of that, maybe in a year or two, once we get to that point where we can start optimizing, and we have a large enough team to actually be able to move some servers around and do a full transition or whatever, then we'll care about it. But for right now, I'd rather focus on growing than sort of rebuilding what we already have.
Yeah, what Jeff says, I completely agree with, except I do watch every month. If we're not using something or it's like lagging, we tear it down. We have to be using those machines. If we're not, we're done.
So, Devin, you've been in business for a while, and Softlayer got started in 2005. What was the reason? How did you find out about them?
Yeah, I've been hosting personal servers for years and years and years and years with various hosting providers, probably since around 99 up, and had a lot of unhappiness across the board for various reasons. And that's just me running like a handful of small websites. And then I found SoftLayer, probably 2005.
How did you find it?
A friend of mine recommended them, another Boston tech guy. Hey, you should try these guys out. Super happy with them. Deployed them in my first box in about 64 minutes, and it just worked great. And so when it came time to start the company, they were who I knew, who I'd been happy with. And then their private network offering at the time was, I think, pretty unique and lends itself incredibly well to building the 3-tier architecture cluster. So those two things are why we started with them, and then just how they've taken care of us since. It's been kind of why we stayed.
Great. Anyone else? Oh, well, Claudia, we heard about the startup program at Rackspace. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, at the end of the startup program, that's when I will make.
How did you hear about that?
Through Mass Challenge. We're incubated at Mass Challenge, which is an incubator right nearby here. There's 120 companies, but that are finalists, and so it's a great coached environment. And Rackspace did reach out to Matt Johns and said, you know, for all the start, and provided the package of the 12 startups that participated in it, and of course we took them up on it. Even though first we were on Amazon, because I just thought that was a default, and then I reached out to Rackspace because of the plan that they had. But Amazon also does do something that I think is interesting. Is they do have a video server that you can just bring up in less than 3 minutes, basically, and you can start streaming videos without problem. So, which is something that Rackspace does not provide. So that's why I started out with Amazon and switched most of it over to Rackspace because of cost and because of also the better support that they have.
Other questions? I saw one there.
Hi. So I host content management sites. We've got kind of 2450 on a server. Some are UPSs, some are not quite sure, but a little more cloud-based. They're all private hosting companies. The question I have is, what's the solution for one-time backups? You know, Amazon's great, except that when you destroy your instance, you lose everything once you go out to S3. But S3 is kind of expensive, and I'm not sure after that remirroring storm they had a while ago that I want to, you know, be cheap and go for the, reduced reliability S3.
So let me just repeat that question. You run content management sites and you're looking for a solution that hosters provide or what these guys use to do a backup?
Just as, like, you know, my business is very different from the panels up there, but basically the problem I have is every time I need to go to a backup, it's usually because somebody changed the content, and it's about 5 days later they said, oh, Kyle, I really want to do that.
Okay.
So all of our providers have 24-hour backups. They've spun up new machines, they've done stuff like that. So I know the 24-hour backup works. The question is like, I just want to go back 5 days.
Okay. Does anyone have a implementation like that?
Yeah. Not cloud specific, but that's an issue that we have to solve because we've got clients who have the ability to go in and make changes to content and static assets. And so there's a couple of things that we do, one of which is for some clients we use as a version repository to manage all that. We've got scripts that handle all that, make it very easy to know who changed what when, and roll back any particular file at any particular point in time. We have other clients who, for whatever reason, that's not a good option for them. We use a tool called RDIF Backup, and it's a scheduled Linux service that does a diff-only backup to a backup server, and we can restore any file or directory or an entire server from any point in time in history.
What's it called?
RDIF Backup. It's free and works out really, really well for us. We push it all off to an offsite data center from wherever our client is.
And how did you pick your offsite data centers? I'm assuming that this is all done like electronically, like there's no tape involved.
Oh, no. Right. Some people with soft layers, they've got 13 data centers across the world. So if we're hosting a client out of Dallas, we have RDIF backup all their files to a server that we have in Seattle. If they're hosted in Seattle, we back up to Dallas, Amsterdam, etc.
Another question? Yeah. Oh wait, sorry. Yeah.
All right. Well, so I guess it's not for Jeff, but even Phil mentioned some stuff. Is there some kind of rule of thumb where, at this scale, cloud is cost effective, but at another scale, we should do it in-house, like Cobol or dedicated servers? Is there kind of some metric? Because some of you guys are spending a lot of money a month, and maybe you save 20% by doing that in-house. Cobol.
Well, I don't know, it's going to depend on your size, but I think the answer is it's, what's your OpEx versus your CapEx, or your ability to even do that CapEx expenses. The numbers won't lie. You can buy servers cheaper, but do you want to run them yourself? Do you want to lease a Terramark for Equinix? Do you want to buy backhaul bandwidth? We do that as well, and remote hands. Or do you want to go into like a hoster who's already done that for you, and they're just providing you the access to that capability? You got to build the models, and you've got to do that comparison based on your number of machines. You should be able to figure that out.
Great.
And just add that it probably also really depends on your need to scale up or down, right?
Okay, probably two more questions. Okay.
You're all using infrastructure services. Have you also been looking at things like App Engine or what it's called from Red Hat, OpenShift and that sort of technology? Or is that not working for the software that you're running?
I think it depends what platforms you want to build on and the flexibility you need. If you're building something that's very sort of just web-facing and you can build it in whatever language you want, App Engine might be terrific. For us, it doesn't give us the flexibility we need on the back end.
We've been building out lots of ancillary tools, like we're building an add-on, like things that are entirely separate from our main app and don't have the same PCI requirements. And I tend to put those in Heroku first to prove it out and then figure out what to put later. So I think a lot of those services, again, it's kind of the reason you end up at AWS, it's so easy to get started. So there's definitely something to set there.
So Michael, that's interesting. You develop on Heroku, so Rails app or something, and then you decide where to deploy it in production. So it's easy to extract that from Heroku onwards. Wow, that's news to me. That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So
It's a good push away.
so moving from PaaS to IaaS is fine in the Rails world from Heroku. Very cool.
And we're looking at Heroku too, but it's strictly not Rails anymore. We use Rails and you can use Kotlin for Heroku as well, and so we're looking at Heroku. So not just Ruby.
Another question?
Okay, guys.
The last one here.
What's your, I guess, some questions about buyer power. What's your ability to negotiate with your providers? I mean, get them down off their list price and that as you scale up. I mean, maybe also, Devin, you mentioned you started in software with just 5 instances and now you're this big customer. How much are discounts changing as you grow and things like that?
I don't want to give away too much, but they've certainly been good to us. And with any situation where you're leasing hardware on a monthly basis, there's significant work, right? There's a lot of reasons for that. There's huge infrastructure costs involved in trying to pay down. We start actually looking at, all right, this is what I'm paying for this box per month, and this is what it would cost for me to buy or build this box myself. You're like, Jesus, it's kind of crazy. Especially when you start looking at add-ons like hard drives or RAM or RAID controllers or all that kind of stuff. You can very easily price out boxes that are hilariously expensive. And they've been very, very good to us in general, but specifically around kind of those high margin add-ons that are core for us, right? Huge amounts of RAM are very, very important for us. So they've been very good to us. They have a program, a published program, where you hit certain levels of scale, where you get 5% off, 10% off, 20% off across the board. And then we've been able to get kind of better deals beyond that as we scale up. And part of it is that we have a very technical team, so we rely on their support. We're very light support for them. We almost never call them unless it's something completely on their end. And so I think it's easier for them to throw us the hardware for a little bit cheaper because they know we're not going to be on the phone every day. It's just my guess. They treat us well.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. And certainly thank the panelists.